8 miles north of the skyline and wealth of San Francisco, California, lies the city of Richmond and the environmental justice case of Chevron's Richmond oil refinery. Construction of what is today the Chevron refinery began in 1901, when Richmond was still a town and not yet a city. Today, the refinery is a massive plant, measuring 4.5 square miles and processing 240,000 barrels of crude oil daily. It's not an accident that many African Americans ended up living next to the Chevron refinery. It's the product of racism. Early black settlers came to California from 1890 through the 1920s. Many settled in Alameda and Contra Costa counties where there were industrial jobs, and sought to escape the Jim Crow laws and violence of the South. However, according to historian and emeritus professor Dr. Shirley Ann Wilson Moore, they were at the bottom of the economic and social hierarchy. Richmond incorporated as a city in 1905. Within the next 10 years, it turned to racially segregated housing. By 1941, just as the World War II boom was kicking off in Richmond, most of the African American population lived in and around North Richmond, which had fewer services than the city of Richmond. According to historian Dr. Wilson Moore, employment for African Americans in Richmond prior to World War II was precarious. During World War II, Richmond became a major shipbuilding site, which caused the city's population to explode. From 1940, the population nearly quadrupled in just a 3-year period, adding 70,000 new residents. New residents migrated from elsewhere in the U.S., including many African Americans from the South, to work on building ships. These workers were housed in dormitories, apartment buildings, and temporary structures. Segregated housing remained in place after World War II. According to journalist Alexis Madrigal, the master plan that Richmond created in 1949, after the shipbuilding jobs had evaporated, was to bulldoze over 80% of its public housing and keep its single-family neighborhoods segregated to maintain all-white homeowners' property values. By 1952, there were still no African Americans living in any of Richmond's permanent low-rent housing, and in central Richmond, there was no housing for purchase or rent for African Americans. As historian Dr. Wilson Moore puts it, the end of shipbuilding meant that African American residents of Richmond lost their tenuous foothold on the employment ladder. During this time, people of color were pushed to live in North Richmond and other neighborhoods located close to sources of pollution, such as the refinery, chemical companies, and railroad yards. Many white residents, who had been living in housing for the war effort, engaged in white flight and moved into new suburban areas outside of Richmond using federally backed loans. We can see echoes of this segregated history today in demographics and the health effects of pollution. Richmond is located in Contra Costa County. Of the 9 counties in the San Francisco Bay Area, Contra Costa is the most industrialized. The western part of Contra Costa County has higher concentrations of people of color, and this is where pollution and its negative health effects are concentrated as well. For example, businesses in Contra Costa County released more than 3.5 million pounds of toxic chemicals in 2010, with over 80% of those chemical releases coming from 4 oil refineries in the west part of the county. Western Contra Costa County also has dramatically more diesel air pollution than the rest of the county or the state of California. From the pie charts, we can see how people of color are concentrated in the western part of the county, and especially in Richmond and North Richmond. These demographic trends have been intensified in the most recent 2020 census. The Chevron refinery is the largest polluter in the city of Richmond, and it released over 575,000 pounds of chemicals in 2010, which is more than all the chemical releases for the entire Alameda County to the south, or the entire Santa Clara County, which is where Silicon Valley is located. While the refinery has cut some of its toxic air emissions since 2004, other toxic chemicals have increased since then. Flaring at the refinery produces air pollution that affects area residents.
Directly out of my window, I look at Chevron and I look at the flaring. Those flares produce that white smoke that I see from those smokestacks. And so we have to breathe it. It blows directly here onto North Richmond. That's what I look at every day.
And while the Chevron refinery is the biggest polluter in the city, it's far from the only source of pollution. As of 2012, there are also 3 chemical companies and 8 Superfund sites, plus many other toxic waste sites. There are also many sources of transportation-related air pollution coming from 2 major highways, 2 rail yards, and tanker ships at the port of Richmond. This pollution results in negative health effects. In Richmond, low-income folks and people of color tend to be the ones living closer to industrial sites, and they have worse health outcomes. Those who live closest to the Chevron refinery have higher rates of heart disease and cancer, and every community that's adjacent to the refinery ranks in the 99th percentile for asthma. In Richmond, these effects are revealed most strikingly in mortality data. People of color in Richmond have 10-year shorter lifespans than white people living elsewhere in Contra Costa County. On Monday, August 6, 2012, a fire at the Chevron Richmond refinery sent over 15,000 people to the hospital. This wasn't the first chemical release incident at the refinery that resulted in shelter-in-place warnings. There had been at least 5 others in the 2.5 decades before the fire, but this one was more serious. The fire released toxic chemicals and fine particulate matter into the air that caused a range of health effects, including chest pain, migraine headaches, eye infections, dizziness, asthma, and upper respiratory infections. In this chart, the gray bars represent the 7 days before the fire and the black bars represent the 7 days after the fire. We can see the spike in respiratory problems on the Wednesdays before and after the fire with a roughly 30-fold increase in incidence. Before the fire, the 2 hospital emergency departments in the area each had an average of 80 visits per day. In the week after the fire, average daily visits went up 5-fold at one area emergency department and 10-fold at the other emergency department. The surge in emergency department admissions was caused by the fire, but it was also due to disparities in healthcare facilities. As of 2012, the western part of the county had about 21% of the population, but had and still has disproportionately fewer medical facilities, even though the population is lower income, in worse health, and is exposed to greater risks. At the time of the 2012 fire, West County had 2 hospital emergency departments. Today, West County has only 1 emergency department in 1 hospital, while the rest of the county has 6 emergency departments in 9 hospitals. The disparity in the number of hospital beds is even worse. Based on 2012 population data, West County has 22 inpatient beds per 100,000 people, while the rest of the county has a 10 times higher rate. The refinery fire was caused by a corroded pipe that was leaking a combustible liquid. The fire was investigated by the U.S. Chemical Safety and Hazard Investigation Board. The CSB found that management had been warned at least 6 times in the decade before the explosion that the pipes should have been inspected for corrosion. Beth Rosenberg, a former CSB board member, wrote about the incident. Although no workers died in the fire, she said that the financial incentives aren't aligned for the company to protect workers. Furthermore, refineries in the United States are old, but they're well insured. This incentivizes them to run the equipment until failure. And if the refinery shuts down after an accident, the company might benefit from higher gas prices. Thus far, we've seen how racism and segregated housing contributed to the environmentally unjust effects that the Chevron Richmond refinery and other polluting industries have had on low-income communities of color in Richmond and West Contra Costa County. Now let's look at the activism and environmental justice fights that have been waged by these communities. Local groups, including Communities for a Better Environment, or CBE, Asian Pacific Environmental Network, or APEN, and the West County Toxics Coalition have been working for environmental justice regarding the Chevron refinery for decades. CBE works primarily in the Latino community, and APEN works primarily in the Laotian community. They, along with allies, have used a variety of approaches including direct action, lawsuits, training and informing community members, and advocacy for better outcomes. Bill Gallegos, former executive director, describes some of the ways that CBE has helped residents to organize and build power to make change in the community.
Philosophically, it's about creating hope in communities that have really been beat down. And our belief is that if they're given the information and given the knowledge about how the system works, they can come together and they can begin to organize effectively. They can begin to fight for policies that will improve their community.
It's Jessica and Anna from CBE.
We knock on doors. We do house meetings. We meet people so that we can understand their reality. We provide formal training to them as well as organizing skills when they integrate that with their own organizing. And they really begin to get other people involved. That's really where they begin to see that this stuff can work. You know, we really can build a social movement that can have an impact.
APEN has used political pressure. After a refinery explosion in March 1999, Richmond's telephone warning system was only in English, which was insufficient for the thousands of Laotian refugees in the city. APEN organizers worked with the Laotian community to write postcards and provide public testimony, and they won multilingual warnings. As a coalition, APEN, CBE, and the West County Toxics Coalition have taken legal action. In 2005, Chevron sought to expand its refinery by enabling it to process dirtier crude oil. Despite the coalition packing public hearings, the City Council still approved Chevron's plan. Along with Earth Justice, the coalition filed a lawsuit in 2008 and won an injunction stopping the expansion. For many decades, the Richmond members of the City Council were pro-Chevron. That power balance changed as the Richmond Progressive Alliance gained control of the City Council and in some years also the mayor's office. In 2013, 1 year after the 2012 fire, organizers used direct action with 2,500 people rallying and marching and 210 people arrested at the refinery. Also with the 2012 fire, the shift in political power brought the first time that the city of Richmond sued Chevron. In 2018, Chevron agreed to a $5 million settlement for the 2012 fire. The biggest monetary win against the Chevron refinery came from the Polluters Pay campaign, which was led by a coalition of residents, community organizations, unions, and workers. In August 2024, the Richmond City Council approved a $550 million settlement to be paid out over 10 years. The long-term trends in California and the U.S. likely point to more refinery closures. The Chevron refinery is still the largest employer in Richmond and the largest taxpayer. As activists consider what to do, it means navigating between dependency on the refinery and the harms it causes, and how to achieve the most just outcome possible in an uncertain future.